I can hear.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Oh, is that the fancy new mic, Alex?
I mean, I've had it for like 2 years. I just haven't used it. I decided to use things.
Okay. I can hear you.
Yeah, what's causing that delayed echo?
It's not. It's just me
Is that
testing
coming out?
that Twitch is live.
Okay. Okay, it was coming out of your. Okay, it was coming out of yours.
Yeah. Working
I'm
as
watching
intended.
the progress bar. Uh, while I switch back to live here.
Whatever. Whatever.
Hey, everybody. We have an audience.
We do. We're like live, right? They can hear us.
They can hear us, they cannot see yet.
Okay.
Just waiting for your screen share to start.
Yeah, and Steam just finished downloading the release version, so firing that up.
Steam always wants to update at the worst possible times.
Well, I was on. I was synced to our future work in progress stuff.
I
So
see.
yeah. Discord. Why did you turn on the Discord overlay again? Whatever. You're useful this time. My stream sharing.
Yep. You're good.
Awesome.
So now that's screwed up the cameras again. So give me a second. We still have
Yeah.
4 minutes for everything to be perfect.
Cool. Oh, it's almost definitely a slideshow for everyone. 1 second. Hopefully it's streaming better. I think I was on better text readability, which limits it because we use Discord for work and often share our screens for non-game related reasons.
All right, we are good. I think. Are you guys ready for me to switch over to your
I'm ready.
cameras?
Yeah,
So ready.
let's do it.
Sweet. All right. Welcome everybody to our March update Q&A with Alex Preston and Michael Clark. Hey Alex and Michael.
Hello.
Hey, hey.
So, to start, can
Howdy.
you just tell us a bit about this update?
This update is a minor update, as we have labeled it. And minor doesn't mean that we didn't do a lot of things. It just means that it's not going to like tectonically shift gameplay or anything like that. We're fixing bugs. We're adding some, new mods. Maybe an enemy or two or things like that. So even minor updates are a lot. Maybe there's a feature that we added in. So we do our lists for good reason to make sure folks are informed on what exactly is going in. But yeah, Fog of War is one of those features that snuck in there. So we got a lot of stuff in here, but it's
Yeah,
somewhat minor things.
the big feature in this one is Fog of War. We also added a new weapon, the Death Wheel, new assassin, the Swordmaster, um, and some new enemies, including a new Elite Leaper and the Crystal Leaper.
Love a Crystal Leaper.
Awesome.
Oh yeah, go
Well,
ahead, E.
the community members have taken the initiative of writing down a bunch of Q&A questions in advance, which is great. So we have a nice little repository of questions to pull from. First question
Awesome.
is from
Love
Jen.
it.
Why doing Fog of War now?
Why now? Because this was the time that we finally had time to actually get it in there. We wanted to do Fog of War for some time, but it's one of those features that just couldn't take priority over a bunch of other very functional and necessary features as we're coming up on early access release back in January. And as is the case with a lot of features, we have, or every feature, we have to stack rank that stuff and judge how long is this going to take us, and is this going to take away from some other more vital feature? And the answer was yes. So we got a version, first pass of it in now, finally. So it's something, oftentimes when you see features making their way into the game, 9 times out of 10, it's something that we've been wanting to do for quite some time, have been planning to do for quite some time, and just couldn't find the time yet. And here we are in that update.
Yeah. Um, Over the course of development too, we've experimented a lot with how much information we have for players. Originally, there was no map, and then there was a very basic map, and then we started adding more information to that. And Fog of War is a way to reduce the amount of information there immediately, while still making sure that it serves as a useful reference for players over the course of a run.
Yeah, discoverability is important.
So bonus questions on that. Why not putting it in the mini map as well?
Again, feature priorities. The mini map is more of a radar. We'll judge if we want to do anything further there for imagery, but one step at a time.
And bonus question 2, why aren't prisms covered by the fog when they should be?
We still want to give players some direction, so we'll continue experimenting with what's featured on the map to start versus what's discoverable, and balancing that stuff out, and having upgrades and mods to help out on those fronts too. So we'll keep taking feedback on those fronts, what people like and don't like.
Great. Let's see. Just wanted to let everyone in the audience know that I'm monitoring the chat here if you wanted to post in any questions. Going to continue to pull from the repository. What direction do you think game will lean on regarding roguelike, roguelite versus extraction?
We still have extraction as a critical feature, but we're leaning more into the roguelike-y nature of things. A bit more of the things are only available for X amount of time / death having meaningful value on that front, and some harsher consequences / bigger bonuses during runs. So we'll have more on that in our April big update, our content drop 1. But always striving for that balance of, it's an open world, you're collecting loot, but also it's run structure that requires some consequences and what's going to be fun or impactful, or let you do the most with the time that you have in that run, versus what's the longer term progression. So they're all very complicated problems to solve that we take great care to make sure we listen to feedback, talk internally, test, try different things before we put anything out into a patch. So
what direction do you want to push characters and loot design? Something that is more guided by what you pick at the start, or something that can change any minute by what you find in the open world?
Also balance. I feel like I'm going to give a lot of lawyer answers here of it depends, but it really does in these types of in this type of game, where we do want players to have some clearer direction when they start out, as far as like, what can I do with my build? And so part of that is making sure that the first bits of loot you get have some sort of indicator for maybe what you want to be building off of. But we also want to allow for players to be able to sort of change the direction of the things they're building towards throughout the course of a run. Maybe not super frequently, but enough that it feels like you could get some variety, or if you stumbled upon or were rewarded with some really cool gear, that you wouldn't be locked out of using it if you really wanted to gamble and say like, yeah, but I could do like this crystal build instead of what I was doing with bleed before. So it's a balancing factor on all those fronts, is really the ultimate answer to all this stuff, and it takes a lot of careful iteration. But yeah, would like players to,
we do have some plans to sort of make characters more differentiated, though, right?
Yes, so that is a part that I hadn't really dug into, but it's a good thing to point out, Michael. Thank you. Basically, for shipping the game out in January, we had limited time to do, again, certain things, and part of that is how different each of the characters are. So definitely our goals for CD1 and well beyond is to further make sure there are clear differences between each player character, their sort of qualities and maybe what types of things they use, what type of special things they have attached to them, and stats and stuff like that. We already have stats that somewhat differentiate them, but they're a little too homogenous on many fronts. So we definitely want to go a lot further on making sure each player character has a clear play style and identity and sort of ways of funneling them into, maybe this character is a little tankier and would benefit from some more tanky mods and equipment and things like that, and has some potential perks to feed into that stuff in the way that we don't do in the strongest way right now. So
Great. Polaire asking a very popular question. Any plans on adding a way to pause the game?
here's the thing about pausing. Um, Multiplayer, not going to happen. It's just, it's a live game. We don't want to mess with that. It's not a thing you see very often in games for good reason. Can cause a lot of issues, bugs, whatever else, and it's just funky to like vote on pausing a game. Single player, perhaps, never say never. We're considering that. I know it's something that's been called out, and it's possible we put something in for single player runs, but for multiplayer, it's kind of antithetical to the whole online thing.
Let's see. The current roadmap ends after April. Will we be getting an updated roadmap next month?
We will be getting an updated roadmap soon. Exactly when that updated roadmap is, maybe we'll hold off on saying exactly the answer, but not too long after whatever updates we're going to have. We want to make sure we're putting stuff out there for the audience as frequently as we can, so there's awareness on like what's next. So likely we'll have something to go along with our update, but I can't tell you exactly what date because we're still figuring out exactly what date we'll put it out there for it.
Exactly. One of the things we don't want to do is put out a speculative roadmap and then have to make a lot of changes. We're in early access, and we want to be responsive to player feedback, and seize the opportunity when there's something good, and not be beholden to a plan we had 4 months ago if it's no longer as useful to us. But so all of that means that we don't want to put out like a long roadmap that we're not going to stick to. So they're going to be shorter, and we're going to stick to them much more strongly than some other games may.
Yeah, we have a pretty clear path for ourselves internally on a lot of our content and sort of systems, but we also want to leave room for feedback, for discovery on our end, on the player's end. Like, what are people resonating with? What are we finding on the design side that seems to be like stronger or better or worse? Or there's all sorts of stuff that can happen in early access, and part of the point here is, even with the restrictions that we have on, definitely we want to get these bosses in, these characters, and these points of interest, and whatever else, we still want to leave flexibility to be responsive to ourselves internally and responsive to what the audience is talking about, which we do. And that means given clear information where we can, and leaving it ambiguous or open when we can't.
What is the decision process for deciding if an effect becomes an affix versus holobyte versus exe?
Typically holobytes, and this is something that we're going to be doing for our larger drop in April, are intended to be pretty powerful, more game changing, or like foundational in some way to the build. If you think about something like Balatro, you can think of like the Jokers in Balatro. That's more the realm of what we're looking at for holobytes and how we think about them when we categorize them. Affixes can be powerful, but can be really particular also, and very small in their scope of what they cover, even if they're powerful, which is like, I don't know, it does, plus damage on this thing is a lot or double damage on this gun could be a pretty powerful effect, but that's not going to like fundamentally necessarily change the way you do builds globally. It's just like, wow, this piece of gear is really good. And so again, affixes can be powerful, weak to powerful, but again, usually a lot more specific in the venue that the vector that they're addressing. And then the EXEs, there are permanent progression for sort of like how the player navigates and upgrades certain parts of their kit and maybe unlocks some different moves. And so it's a little more all-encompassing because it can be, and we have plans to continue to change that stuff and work on it, but it can be things like opening up different utility moves that you wouldn't otherwise have, or permanently upgrading some part of your stats, like your health or health kits or things like that. So they're also very powerful, but they're not going to fundamentally change the types of builds you make. They're just going to generally be good. So if you think about Hades, like the mirror in that game is more how we think about the EXEs. It's like, this is your permanent progression. This should make future runs better and easier, generally speaking.
Great. And this is going to conflate two questions. What are the plans to make it Steam Deck verified or optimizing for Steam Deck?
We're always doing optimization, across wherever we can. There's plenty to do. It's a big game. It's open world. It's multiplayer. We have a lot of things running in the background to make this game tick, and to build out the procedural worlds that we make. So it just takes time to optimize. So I can't give you a specific ETA other than like we're always working on it. Every time we put out a patch, there's more performance stuff we address. And it also depends on Valve and their process there for approval. There's little UI things that we got to do to make sure anytime we add stuff in there, it's viable on deck because of the small resolution and screen. And again, there's just general performance stuff that is ongoing. We're going to keep working on and get in a better and better spot. So it'll just take a bit of time.
Yeah, the one thing that we need to do still before Steam considers us verified as opposed to playable is a full pass on the UI to make the text play nicer at the 1280 by 800 resolution. That is an ongoing process that we have going on in UI, but our UI team serves both adding new features and work on the new things for our next update as well as working on that. So when we're verified, we will announce. Right now, the game is playable. It's performing a lot better on Steam Deck than it did at launch, and I would recommend if you have a Steam Deck and you haven't played it on there, give it a try. We're testing more on Steam Deck regularly as well.
Yeah. The UI is a unique case because it's not just, hey, your resolution's lower. It's, hey, your resolution is lower and your screen is very small. So typically a monitor, even if it's at like 720p, which there's not a lot these days that are 720p, you're looking at like a much larger screen, so smaller text isn't as much of a problem. So, but now you have a 7-inch screen or 6-inch or whatever the Steam Deck's actual dimensions are on the screen size, and it's just like, that makes it so much harder to look at that text and that iconography. So that takes a very particular, set of changes to make sure we get verified on Steam to like match their font scale and everything that they need. So not crazy work, just work that takes a little bit of time. There's a back and forth, and we have a lot of priorities, so we'll get there.
Great. Now that cores are much harder to find due to the fog of war, any plans to adjust the core mechanics, e.g. converting other resources into cores?
We'll have some bigger updates on that in CD1 in April. That'll address, open up some new discussion on that front, I'll say. So yes, we'll be doing some work on that for sure.
Now some questions from Scott Hill, who was the person who took the initiative to collect all these questions initially.
Hi, Scott Hill.
Thanks, Scott Hill. What is the intended drop rate for Abyss Stones?
1,000,000%. No, we had, I'm trying to remember our exact averages. Basically, what's that, 8?
I was gonna say they're guaranteed on your first boss and on a cycle completion, and then it's like a percentage everywhere else, right?
Right. Basically, how we think about drops, and even aside or in addition to Abyss Stone, like any of the drops for loot stuff or like permanent currency things, we sort of think about it on an average basis. Like what is the average that we would like players, generally speaking, to get these things at, these items at? We kind of look down our list from top to bottom of like more rare stuff, more permanent stuff versus very temporary run-based things, and we just ask that question from top to bottom and make sure we're sort of measuring against. Yeah, we actually think one an hour or one per run or 3 per cycle would be valuable. So we're constantly assessing that stuff anytime we're making adjustments to economy and drop rates too, and we're making those drop changes in response to, ooh, that's too much or that's too little. So that's the broader version of it. For Bistone in general, right? You know, we want to keep it rare, but not too rare. So one a run, generally speaking, two a run. There's some threshold between there, like 1 and 3 that we like on average, but it'll depend on some factors, and we don't want to give the same amount each time because it is supposed to be something that you'll use longer term. Permanent currencies take a lot of balancing.
Are there plans to add other ways to obtain abyss stones?
At the moment, there isn't like an explicit thing that I can tell you, like, we're definitely going to do this, but overall, yeah, we're always looking at different ways to get different things, and mostly what we want to make sure of when we're talking about like methodologies for gathering stuff in general in the game. Our goal, here in early access is to make it clear and consistent first, so that players can, understand, like, reliably, this is where I get X, and reliably, this is where I should usually get Y and Z, et cetera, et cetera. And then we can start playing more with, but also you could get X from this thing once in a blue moon. So that's part of what we're working on, is making sure we establish those routes, the primary routes first for gathering all the different things, and making sure it's very clear for all players, not just experienced players, because got a lot of complexity in this game. So
Can you share an idea of the intended structure of the game and what Endgame may look like? Or what happens after we beat the Abyss King?
yeah, we have a lot of story that we want to tell with all of our different crowns and the Abyss King himself, and sort of like what's happened in this place. And so you'll be working your way through all those narrative components. We put some stuff in already as an example for sort of the pieces of narrative that we're looking at, but we have a lot more to share on that front. And over the course of early access, we'll be putting more and more in. And you'll make your way through over many different hours, gathering that full backstory until you get it all, defeat the Abyss King, the appropriate amount of times. So that's kind of the overall story loop that you'll be getting, or like story progression that you'll be getting. And then after that, for endgame stuff, we want to be doing ways of modifying the run to make it a bit more challenging in different spots. I mean, you can think about like Hades Heats, and there's plenty of games that, like Halo Skulls and all that stuff that do fun modifiers to like change up the way the bosses might work, or certain enemies, or whatever else. And, then to have sort of an end game set of items slash, modifiers on the loot itself that helps you get more powerful stuff too. So I'm just kind of bumping it up. We have other things in mind longer term, but it'll kind of depend, whether we want to do more cosmetic things, but that's also desired longer term for end game stuff. Palettes, colors, all that fun stuff.
Cool. Besides elite variants, are there plans to introduce new enemy types or categories?
We have plans to introduce a lot more enemies, but no, nothing like here's another version of an elite or another thing that's like adjacent to an elite where they're powerful in these ways. We've got the mini bosses, the assassins that run around and spawn in, and they're pretty unique. The elites occupy a particular space, and then we have a lot of variants below elites that can do a variety of things. And I think there's like 6 or 7 palettes for those that kind of change up the gameplay pretty significantly. So ultimately, it's just about enemy variety more than it is about their categorization at the end of the day.
Are there plans to let us wield the assassin's weapons?
They use some of the tools that you use. I believe that some of them.
I believe they're all the player weapons, right?
Yeah, they use, well, some of their tools do some slightly different
Some,
things,
yeah,
but they are basically using your equipment just in a fancier way. And so it looks like it's kind of like a super powered version of the gear. But if you look at the models, typically it's like, yeah, they're using your tools technically.
What?
But if the answer is like, can I get the like crazy mind power or whatever else, or like flaming explosions that this character uses, unlikely. We might integrate that in some other way, but it's supposed to be unique to them for good reason. So
When will Goro finally get his noodle shop store unlocked?
Um, it's on our content list. Um, we're we're figuring out where exactly it falls. Not too far into the future, but not right away. It's kind of like a middle item at the moment. We'll see where we get to it, but it's something we don't want to fall off for too much later in the year. But we also want to make sure we address a lot of other stuff first.
not in April.
Definitely not in April.
Can we expect an opening cutscene, picture conversations with NPCs, or any additional ways for the plot stuff to be communicated to the players?
Yes. Opening cutscene stuff. We'll be working on that and have more to share there. We have bookending for our story that we want to provide, including onboarding experience and whatever else. We'll be doing some stuff for the onboarding experience for CD1, and it'll be kind of a first pass at it, and we'll continue to work on it, you know, as we're working on every part of the game continuously, even post that drop. So, nothing final there, but at least you'll get a glimpse at what we're going to be doing there for the intro and opening of the game, as like a draft one. And then, yeah, longer term, we want to do more with our NPCs, the vendors in the hub. Like, there's a lot of room to grow there. So we'll keep you all posted when we have specifics. We lots of plans there for what we want to do with our fun NPCs beyond just sell us and buy stuff.
I will also toss out that CD1 is our internal name for the April update, as in content drop one,
Oh,
because
sorry.
you called it CD1, and yeah, and I'm like, I know what that is. EE knows what that is. Not everyone else will.
CD1 equals
It's
April update.
yeah, not the first half of an OST.
Yeah. Nobody knows what a CD is, Michael.
Any plans for adding friendly fire for player or enemies?
That's so mean. Um, I think I'm not gonna say no. I mean, it would depend on like the weapon or the enemy or what we're trying to do there. I maybe that we would want to say this enemy or this ally could hurt you with this thing, but generally speaking, this game's got a lot going on in multiplayer, and so Michael, you're just eating a ton of damage there.
Yeah,
Um,
so two things. One, I had Berserker armor on for half of that, and the second thing is the Discord overlay has our videos over my health bar, which is why
oh,
I'm not using medkits very well.
um, yeah. Again, like there's definitely some like chance for some fun mods or like setups to say, hey, taking damage is intentional, or now you can do damage in certain ways where you couldn't. But overall, we want to limit that stuff because it's multiplayer, it's chaotic, it's a pretty kinetic, fast-paced game. And when you start to introduce that stuff, it gets really unfun real quick.
Assassins currently feel a little underwhelming since they don't really drop anything. Any plans to add to their loot pool?
Yeah, they will ultimately have some more specialized stuff for you to pick up. So stay tuned. They will have cool stuff. Not right, nothing fancy right now.
Let's see. Alex Michael EE. Dogs or cats?
Why not both?
Yeah, it's not an or.
For me, it's
I have
cats. Cats all the
I
way.
have I have both of those. Hi.
Yeah, I had both of those. Our dog crossed the Rainbow Bridge this summer, but we got two cats as well, and they are locked out of here because they are little criminals and they will cause problems if they sense I'm on camera.
Yeah, this is Lettuce. She's a cat, if you couldn't tell. Some people have seen
Lettuce.
Moxies, so they know I have both.
Mm-hmm.
All
And
right.
here's
Will
Moxie.
there be 4 crowns after the April update, or will the new crown replace Dro version 2?
Well, the new crown. Yeah, we'll have more crowns for very soon, and into the future
there
we
will
will
be
continue
one
to
new
add them.
crown. Yeah, there will
Yeah.
be one new crown in the April update. So there will be Dro, there will be a second Dro, there will be Exus, which I'm not counting then, and then there's Exus, and there's the new one. So we'll have more information on that in the future.
Ooh,
I almost said the new one's
spicy
name.
drop.
Popeye.
Um, the blues in Hyperlight Drifter have horns and ears, but I think someone from the team once said they originally weren't furry-like species. Were the blues in Hyperlight Breaker always feline slash catfolk, or were they something different before?
They're always cat people.
Alright. With the new Fog of War mechanic, can we expect changes to danger mechanics next patch so we can explore the map on our own time? More specifically, to enemy meteor sky drops frequency. It feels kind of anti fun to just force us to extract and feels like you're playing on the clock.
You will definitely see some changes on all those fronts for next update in significant ways. I'll keep it at
Yep.
that.
This is kind of a
We don't
you.
like anti-fun.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
hate
that's not the purpose
anti-fun.
of most games.
Well, Death Stranding would have you believe otherwise.
I enjoyed it. I had fun with that. But I think Kojima could make a game about reading the phone book, and I would be into that. For the 20-minute exposition about the history of phone books in the middle of it.
Listen, like the specifics of the games playing it is not so fun. Anyway, whatever. It's entertaining. Be a great TV show. Great anime.
Um, this is a broad question. With
Awesome.
roguelike games being all about starting weak and power spiking by finding cool loot, and extraction games being all about going in with a stacked loadout beforehand and finding valuable things to sustain interest to keep doing runs, how do you plan on making these opposites feel better and less contradictory?
You'll see in CD1. Sorry, in the April update. We'll be doing some significant revisions specifically on those fronts. So
Yeah.
there is a way to blend those two, and I think we have a good version of it.
Are there plans or possibilities for weapons that are more unconventional, like for blades something akin to the Alt Drifter's drone weapon, and for rail stuff like a bow and arrow or throwing knives?
Mm. We did prototype
Mm.
a bow and arrow. Um,
Yeah.
we have some stuff in the queue that'll be fun. Um, I don't know how unconventional people will find it, but yeah, and it's not all just laser weapons and swords. So
Are there
there will
plans
be a
for.
giant shoe that you jump into,
Oh.
and it'll be called
Yeah. I want
Karubu's sneaker.
legally distinct.
Very distinct.
Yeah. Not an Italian, a different Italian plumber reference.
Yes, a French plumber.
Yeah.
Are there plans for expanding on rail mechanics, such as being able to zoom in while aiming or having rail specials?
Zoom in while aiming, like a scope. Uh, we have some mods that do some fun things. So in that way, there's going to be there's always going to be more room for variety on what we do, and then again, having rails that are a little bit more different than what you've seen previously is also, on the docket, but nothing specific on like a new mechanic for it or like a, an additional like alt fire or something for them. No.
How does the team feel about manually changing the in-game time of day?
I don't think we've ever been asked that question. We have some other things tied to it that we are planning to do longer term, so it's important that it stay sort of tied to particular elements of run progression. So you'll see more of what we're talking about as we, put our April update out and beyond. Right now, time of day stuff is a bit ambiguous what it's for, and that was kind of where we had to leave it for launch. But as we get into more updates, it'll become more useful and more prominent on like what time of day is associated with, and again, important to make sure that it is tied to very particular systems. So.
Are there any plans to take a pass on weapon feel, i.e. changing blade specials, to better contribute to weapon identity or animation lockouts?
I mean, always we're looking at everything that we do and where we can polish, whether it be the feel of a particular weapon or a move on the weapon or a combo or whatever else. So, if there's feedback from folks on, hey, this could be better in these ways, we read comments, we pay attention to the Discord. We're always looking out, and the game is in early access for good reason because we got plenty to polish here. Some weapons we feel are more close to final than not, but plenty of others, haven't had as much attention, or their like special hasn't really had as much attention, and so you'll see varying degrees of completeness, and we're doing everything we can to complete that stuff and really polish it out. But it takes a little bit of time, and whatever feedback you all have on specifics is great.
That is a good segue into this next question. Could you possibly speak to the process around how player feedback is integrated into your development timeline? For example, are there other criteria besides popularity that factor into your decision making when considering community ideas?
Yeah, I think this is a good question. I mean, really, sorry, Michael, you were going to say something?
No, I was agreeing with you. You said it's a good question. I'm agreeing.
Yeah, I mean, the main way that we sort of think about feedback and process feedback is always in tandem with what our goals are internally, and seeing what is congruent with that and what is incongruent with that. There's an old adage or idiom or axiom or whatever descriptor you want to use of something about, gosh, I forget who it was, but something about like people can identify on the creative process side of things, like people can identify the problem really well, but leaning on that colleague or whatever else to solve the problem, is usually a mistake. And so it's our job to make sure and solve the problem. Not that the community can't give really valuable feedback, or people internally don't give really good feedback, because we definitely do, but ultimately we always try and filter any of that feedback, even if it's just like identifying the problem, and especially if it's here's how I would solve that problem, with everything again that we're trying to do on the design side and how that fits into the whole picture. Because again, this is a big game, super complicated, a lot of different systems, and really unique in the way we're approaching everything because of the run-based open world procedural stuff. Like all of that makes it multi-layered, and we have to consider each of those pieces at a pretty high level. And it's taken us years of practice on the design side to get to the point of comfort and knowledge to understand like why we would make this decision, because it has like 15 other pieces that it affects when we do this one change. Whatever that change may be, there's always some cascading effects on that. And so again, it just took a lot of practice for us on the design team side of things to get really comfortable with the overall game, to be able to make good decisions / considerate decisions with the rest of the game and design. Because again, there's plenty of suggestions that even people on the team internally have, who are not as up to date on certain things. Or like, hey, why don't we do this? And it's like, well, here's the full context of why X, Y, Z, why we made these decisions. And so, same thing on the community side. We do our best to take everything into account, what people are saying and what they're responding to. We want to make sure that people are having fun, of course, but we always balance that out with what's our overall intention, and also what's the completeness of what we're presenting at the moment. Because sometimes a lot of pieces in the game, won't present in the best light, or there's an incomplete system or idea there that we know where it's going eventually and doesn't feel good right now, but we have some good inclination of like why it will feel good in the longer term, mid to longer term, and so we keep that in mind too. Some of that we'll put on the back burner and kind of do all at once, but I don't know. The complex answer is there. The simple version is like, hey, it's just a lot of process. It's a lot of conversation. It's a lot of careful consideration in those conversations, balancing out all of the different parts of feedback we get from everybody, because we get feedback from the publisher too. We get feedback on all different fronts, and it's all valuable in its own way. And we don't have like a stack ranked list or anything like that. We just look at, hey, what are people saying? How does that fit with what we're trying to do? Should we change something about what we're doing because maybe a lot of people are saying this? We'll reconsider. Or is that going to have an issue with everything else that we're trying to do? And again, these things are all like in a sort of complex array of delicately balanced pieces. So it's not like you can just put one thing in and be like, it doesn't affect anything else. Every decision kind of affects at least a dozen different decisions around it in connection in that matrix. And so it's the spreadsheet thinking. There's just a lot of that, a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of docs, a lot of playing internally, and just a ton of conversation is really what it boils down to, and a huge amount of knowledge that we've built over the last few years building this game that we rely on to give us sort of the best view of, hey, would this be a good thing to add or change or delete or what have you, and why. So
yeah, I'll add to that. The idea that, hey, there's an idea and it's popular, those are two separate pieces of data. And in like a designer's case or an artist's case or Alex's case, because he does all of that, it's their job to take all of that data, take all that feedback, oftentimes conflicting feedback or like a lot of different ideas, and pull a course of action out of that. So it's not a popularity contest. Popularity is valuable as a piece of data, but it's
not the
we're
end
never
all
going
be
to be
all.
in a space where like like if it became just like a voting popularity contest, we wouldn't really be part of the game game development process
Right.
anymore. We would just be there. But that's not why people play games and get
Right.
attracted to particular
Right.
studios. Like
It's
people are
not a
here
democratic
because there's a
process.
Hyperlight isn't something that comes out of everybody voting. Hyperlight is what
Right.
comes out of individuals working on creating something new and wholly up their alley and their interests.
Yeah. You still need to maintain the creative vision for things in whatever department you're in. And my job as director is to keep the whole thing in mind, pay attention to feedback, what have you, but make sure it's following overall our plan, our ethos, like what the vibe of this game is and all the other details. So again, it's a long process of lots of discussion, spreadsheets. Chris asks, what's the favorite spreadsheet cell? D12. That's a great cell. Has a lot of utility, D12. But yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about the subject a fair amount. I could dig in forever on process. It's a really interesting subject to me, and like how you balance this stuff out, because it's super complicated. Like that's the reality of it. There's no two ways when you're making a game, and especially if it's live and out there, and especially if it's run based with a lot of systems, like the more complicated, just the longer those decision making trees and discussions and documents will be, because it just needs to be, because there's a lot more. There's so many factors to consider. So even just something like, hey, could we change this character's starting health value. There's a lot of different things. It can be somewhat simple, but that can have some impact, a cascading effect that touches, again, like a dozen different other decisions that we made. And, it's all balanced against each other. So that's it.
Awesome. There's currently a bug that when holding M, the game's HUD would disappear. Can that become a feature with certain adjustments instead of removing it? Because it makes the game more immersive.
Um, Wait, can you say that one more
So
time?
there's a bug that when you hold M, the HUD disappears. So it's kind of like a full photo mode, which is pretty cool. Can we keep it?
A photo mode would be great eventually.
Yeah.
It's not a high priority right now, but
Um,
longer term, if we can get this game to a good version 1.0, if we can keep supporting this game, like I'd love to add that type of feature.
yeah. I do think we can probably like a full photo mode with like lots of cool stuff like some other games have implemented. That's like a whole thing. We could probably have a disable UI option that we can add more easily. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
something
a
to consider.
exactly. That's a good thing to point out.
Yeah.
There's something in the chat Birdshot added that I'll read out that I think is, a good thing to address perhaps. And Birdshot says, well, we are in the dark about some of the creative vision towards some features. Hope my criticism doesn't come out from being harsh, more from what I don't understand, what this feature wants to achieve. Yeah, I mean, honestly, Birdshot, I don't think we take any of the feedback as like super harsh. We know that, hey, if you're playing the game and providing feedback, that's great. That's an amazing thing already. So we take anything with a grain of salt if it's got like particular way of writing or whatever else. And we know that ultimately, if you're writing something, you give a shit about the game because you want to see it get better, and so do we. So we take it to heart in a good way. And I don't know. Yours has been particularly harsh or anything. I don't know, but I doubt that it is. I think you're fine. And yeah, the point of this type of stream/Discord is to make sure that we're sharing with the people that care the most about this game right now and are helping out on these fronts and want to see it get better and are here to participate and have awareness as much as we can share about our process, about the creative vision, about the design decisions that we make. So, hopefully this stuff helps and asking questions helps, and we're here to sit and chat with y'all, when we put out updates and provide more clarity so that we can work better together on this stuff and get stronger feedback, and that loop can be tighter between us too.
Ooh, this is a good question that I'm interested in. Any chance for a summoner type character or weapon?
Oh yeah,
Hmm.
Great.
that's one of my favorite class types. Is like a necromancer/summoner type. We just didn't have time to get to all the plans we had there for launch, so that's in the cards for sure.
Hmm.
Do you plan on having at least 2 or 3 weapons for each type, like 3 skill and 3 balance?
Yeah, we have quite a few weapons, and right for each category, we want to balance it out so they have about an equal amount each. Some might have a little more than others, but generally speaking, we're not trying to put like one weapon in each type category. We want a couple there at least for each one.
Any plans for more than one vendor?
In the run, I'm assuming, yeah, we have a few run vendors that just haven't made an appearance yet, slash are inconsistent in the way that we spawn stuff. So we got some cool weirdos hanging out in the overgrowth.
Hmm.
There's the chemist. He's a total creep.
Are there plans to make runs longer or allow progression to continue through multiple runs if you don't die?
Come back to us after you play the April update.
Oh, I don't know if you want to answer this one, but what surprises can we look forward to in narrative and connection to Hyperlight Drifter? Also, how will the environment, enemies, and gameplay tell that story?
I can't tell you anything like explicit on Drifter and Breaker and how we're going to tell that stuff. I mean, it's a shared world. The events have an impact in some way, and we'll start to talk about that or start to showcase that more in the narrative. So you'll have to wait and see on that front as we put more of the narrative in and more forward facing.
Is there going to be any playable character that specializes in damage over time or status effects?
Yeah, we whether it's a specific character or it's some part of their setup or it's part of our mods, holobytes. Excuse me, holobytes or otherwise. We want to make sure we lean into more specialization across the board on the build so that if you wanted to be way more about Rails, you could be way more about Rails. If you wanted to be about, a variety of status effects, we would want to accommodate that in the way that you build up. So we've got a lot of plans for all the mods that we're going to be putting out. And mods just means it's a broader category for us, but it's whether it's the EXEs or like the perks you get on a playable character, or the holobytes or the affixes, like those that's the all encompassing term for mods, is like things that change your build. So yeah, we definitely want to provide more specialization across the board for builds and lean into specifics. If you want to be a master of parrying, go for it, and we want to support that stuff.
Actually, a couple questions around parrying. Just generally, are there any updates planned for the parry mechanic?
We're going to keep updating the parry stuff. We made some changes already. I believe in the last update and this update. So we're going to keep working on it and keep perfecting it. I think can always it's one of those very particular moves that just takes some time to iterate on and get right. Frame timing and telegraphing what it's doing and animation and VFX. So we're going to keep working on it.
I really like how the procedural loot is done in this game. That being said, is there any chance there will be static, not permanent loot as a reward for finding special locations or
Mm.
challenges?
Like an exotic piece of gear or something from Destiny. I would assume is kind of the thinking there. It's not off the table. We we like our loot generation too. Like again, we're gonna keep making it better and updating it and pushing on it. But yeah, I mean, we've had conversations around like, could you have some like really nice special piece of gear that's like always this? Possible. I can't tell you that we have an explicit plan around it or when we're going to do that or if we're going to do it, but it's certainly not off the table, depending on how things feel and how they go longer term with a procedural loop. Because I like those systems too. Who doesn't like a Galahorn or whatever it's called from Destiny?
Will we ever see some structures on the extraction point that we would have to maneuver around to fight the waves? Could the structure change between waves?
Um, we'll talk more about extraction stuff next time around, but ultimately, when it comes to like wave based stuff, which is still going to be, we're going to do more with that in the future beyond extraction stuff. So yeah, like navigating that landscape in some way or another when you're in a wave based event, definitely want to do more interesting stuff with it, including obstacles.
What about spellcaster characters or actual sniper rifle users with a scope in and a huge range?
Yeah, we definitely have some plans to be able to have more or less a sniper class. Whether we have like a rifle that is a sniper rifle, probably not, but mods that can get you there to make that range pretty long. Yes, and maybe there's a class, a character that supports that pretty well. Yeah, that's on in the cards. So.
Mm.
Any plans on making extraction provide you only a certain amount of health instead of complete health?
We'll dig into extraction stuff next time around. There's more to talk about with the changes we're making post April. So.
Yeah, expect April to be our biggest update yet by a long shot.
Yeah, we'll be making some changes across the board on a lot of systems of progression and extraction, whatever else. For the better, we think so. Obviously, we want everyone's feedback, but we're pretty psyched about what we're doing there and how that's coming together. So, extraction will have significant changes as well.
How is development divided between the regular monthly updates versus the huge content updates like Buried Below next month?
Um, I
Uh,
mean, oh, go ahead. This is you, Michael.
oh, I was gonna, yeah, I was gonna say, divided like from like a planning or a operational or who's working on these things,
I
sort of
think more of a
question.
who's work. I think
Um,
it's more of a who's working
yeah,
on it.
yeah. So the way we have things broken out is basically the there's the quarterly updates and there's the monthly updates, and most folks are working in the monthly updates, uh, adding things, and there's a relatively small amount of people working on the quarterly updates, like Buried Below, uh, which is the April update. There's a relatively small number of those folks working on it at the beginning. So back in January and before January, we had some folks working on Buried Below, but very, very few. And basically, as we get closer to that, more and more people shift. So right now, everyone is working on Buried Below at this point. Um, and But it starts off, and so we just sort of kind of gradiate from just a few people, mostly environment and tech art, because the sort of terrain updates and the world building updates that we want to do, we don't want to be uh, doing those every month because they introduce a lot of need for QA and all that. So basically, a small group of people are working on that at the beginning, and then the whole team starts to shift over there. So the whole team's on it now, and I think maybe beginning of this month, maybe about half the team was working on it. So it shifts every month, and then it'll reset after this. So we'll have most people working on the monthlies and a few people working on uh, the uh, the summer update, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. There's actually a question here in Rogue Keychain asks about caves and verticality. So, love the idea of caves and stuff, but my main issue is how y'all tackle them depending on the map. Are there plans to include genuine verticality in the game of layers of ground? Proc and final build going to subsist of the same peaks and valleys? Beneath anything? Smart few dashes, that'd be awesome. Yeah, no, the caves are literally below things, so definitely you'll be getting a lot of depth, and we have some stuff planned up for another layer as well. So yes, there's actual genuine depth.
Speaking of other layers, are there any plans for the structures we see floating in the sky?
Yeah, they're there for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
You'll get to go there someday. Sunday, no, someday.
All right, I
Yeah,
think we
we
are.
want to do some stuff. If you remember Drifter and sort of the south and what we did there, there's some things up there we're gonna do.
I think we're running out of time and questions. So let's see. A couple more. When blue blush, would they blush red or a different color?
Uh, More of like a purple red.
All right. After the hoverboard, the situation,
Divorce.
well, will you still implement some changes to nerf it a bit mid combat, like requires 2 stamina pips to be used?
Yeah, we still have plans to sort of address. We want to keep it fun and accessible, but there's a bit more consequence to it, but in a way that doesn't feel bad. So we'll address that a little later, and it's still an important aspect of balancing out like what the board can do while keeping it super fun.
Do you want to answer? Can we get some fishing, low key?
Philip J. Fry. Um, Philip J. Fry, go back to your rocket ships. No, I like fishing in games. I think again, longer term, it wouldn't be a right now thing. It wouldn't be a version 1 thing even perhaps, but longer term, I mean, why not? If we got time and people want it, it's a fun feature to add that could have some cool things to it. If you don't have fishing in your game, I guess you're losing out. So we don't want to lose out.
A lot of people seem to want changes to holobytes. Are you considering making all existing holobytes available in each rank and let them be upgradable to increase the holo pool? Or are you planning to rework the system as a whole, shuffling weapon passives and holobytes around?
Yeah, we have some reworks on that front for holobytes. So you'll see more about that in our April update and how we manage that stuff. So
Sounds like April update is going to be the big one. I
and
It
it
should be
won't be
our biggest
all
one
be
yet.
all. Yeah, well, just to be clear, the game's still a ways away from a version 1.0. So April will be a big update for us, our biggest yet for sure. And we think it'll have a lot of really good stuff in it that players will enjoy and understand better how we're making progress and shaping the full loop of the game and meta progression, all that fun stuff, and things that people brought up and that we've addressed. But ultimately, it's not finished still. It's quite a ways away. So it's another step towards getting the game to a version 1, but it's just that it's a step. So hopefully folks like a lot of what we're putting in there and the direction we're heading with these things and can provide feedback on the things that they don't like so much and why. And we'll keep building off this and keep getting to that version 1 later on down the line. And that's all we can do. Keep building. Keep iterating.
Awesome. All right, well, we are at the end of our hour. Is there any last stuff you want to talk about with respect to this March update? Specifically, anything you want from the community as far as feedback, callouts, things to notice?
Um, our big feature there was our Fog of War. Again, as I'd mentioned earlier, um, game isn't finished. Features aren't finished. Even if we put a feature in, it isn't finished. So there's more to do on that front. If you have more thoughts or feedback on the Fog of War specifically and things you'd like to see there on the map, how it's working, how it's not working, please, put out more detail as you please, and we'll definitely take a look and see if it's congruent with our plans or if we need to do something different there. But overall, we really like Fog of War, and it's an important part of the future of our game. So let us know what you're feeling on that, as well as anything else. But that's the specific call out I would have is
Yeah.
all of Fog of War.
Great. A lot of nice messages coming in. Thanks, guys, for jumping in with the community. We're going to continue doing these with each update. And yeah, thanks for being with us on our journey.
Yeah, thanks y'all.
Yeah.
Thanks for being part of this
Thank
community.
you all.
Thanks for asking and chatting. We'll see y'all soon.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank y'all. Take care. Bye.